Hey everyone, welcome to Sidetrack Adventures. This is Steve. Right now we're in Bouse, Arizona, and during World War II, not too far from here out in the Arizona desert, was a top secret army camp, kind of the Area 51 of its time. Well, today we're going to head out into the desert and try to visit what remains of Camp Bouse. We are currently in western Arizona, northeast of Quartzsite, about 25 miles east of the Colorado River. Most towns in this part of Arizona were founded either because of mining or the railroads, and Bouse started as a mining camp. The town was originally called Brayton, but was renamed Bouse in 1907. The reason we're here today is because of a small bit of military history that happened about 20 miles or so from here. That place is pretty remote though, so all of the memorials for the army camp are here in town. And there are quite a few monuments. One of the monuments here is for 8-Ball the Mule, who was apparently the Camp Bouse mascot. And there's a funny little poem on this monument. And apparently 8-Ball ate one of the nurse's underwear, and that was his undoing. I'm not going to go through all of these, as we'll talk more about the history when we get out to the camp, but I did want to highlight this one for George Wendt, as it says that he made this historical park possible. Obviously, this isn't the same George Wendt that played Norm on Cheers. Right across the street from us is the ANC Mercantile. This was built in 1904. The town post office was here for a while, and it served as the PX for the Army during World War II. The store finally closed in 2018, and it looks to currently be for sale. If you ever find yourself driving through Bouse, it's definitely worth stopping for a few minutes to read the plaques and checking out a tank or two. But it's time for us to head out into the desert to try and find the Army's top secret Camp Bouse. Right now we're heading into an area called Butler Valley, which is sparsely populated, and there's only one paved road in the entire valley. And obviously, that's not the road we're on. I called this place we're heading to kind of the Area 51 of its time, but as far as I know, there were no rumors involving aliens here. Once the United States entered World War II, in order to prepare the Army and the Army Air Force for combat in North Africa, the Desert Training Center was established in the Mojave and Sonoran deserts. This is where General Patton's 3rd Armored Division trained for combat. The Desert Training Center was spread out over 12 camps throughout the deserts of California and Arizona. Because of how spread out the Desert Training Center was, it was the largest Army post in the world. The location of most of the camps were generally known, but where we're heading today, at Camp Bouse, the Army was testing a secret weapon, so a shroud of secrecy was kept over the camp. That's not to say that no one knew there was a camp out here in the desert, as soldiers would come into town, and it's kind of hard to hide a bunch of tanks being shipped in, but the troops at Camp Bouse were not allowed to talk about the activities taking place out here. So we have arrived. Had we visited here in 1943, this whole area would be filled with tents, tanks, and buildings. We'd also probably be arrested on the spot. There's a small historic marker here, but right behind it, you could still see where one of the units that were stationed here had their name in the rocks. It looks like this was for the 738th Tank Battalion. Or maybe it's the 736th, but I think it's the 738th. Both were stationed here. There's also a sign-in register here. Looks like it was created in 2003. And let's take a look. It looks like it's almost completely filled up, so it's taken about 21 years to fill up this whole book. Of course, all the buildings and tents are gone, but you can still see walkways and planters that the troops made with rocks. Having been in the Army myself, if there's one thing you learn in the Army, it's how to landscape. It looks like these cactus were here when the camp was active because they built planters around them. It always cracks me up because they're in the middle of the war, out training, and some poor soldier's tasked with surrounding a cactus with rocks. But there are roads and rock-lined walkways and cactuses surrounded by rocks, as far as the eye could see in every direction. It's really noticeable from above. If you look at this place on Google Maps, or we'll get the drone up in just a minute, but when you see it from above, it's really evident that there was something here. And here's another cactus with a rock planter around it. Major General George S. Patton, who was the first commanding general of the Desert Training Center, was well acquainted with the Mojave Desert. He had spent his early years in Southern California and participated in military exercises in the desert in the 1930s. He selected the locations of the various camps that made up the Desert Training Center. The purpose of the camps was to get American troops ready to face the German Afrika Korps in North Africa. These rock pathways really go off in all directions, but I want to head over to that area that was shaped like a circle that we could see from the drone, which should be this way. This camp was built in August 1943 by the 369th Engineer Battalion, and when it was completed, it had a 500,000-gallon water reservoir and a hospital. And what do you want to bet that there's a rock planter around this cactus over here? Let's take a quick detour and check it out. My guess is there's a rock planter around every cactus. And what do you know? A rock planter. These cactuses are old, so they definitely would have been here when the camp was active. Okay, so back to the circle. We could have just driven over, but sometimes I feel like you miss things when you drive. How could we have ever known that cactus had a planter around it? Camp Bouse was the site of a classified military experiment that explored the potential of a high-intensity carbon arc lamp. And there are some tires over there. It doesn't matter where you go in the desert, it seems like there are always tires around. I'm not sure why people choose to leave tires out in the middle of nowhere like this, but there are always tires in the desert for some reason. But getting back to the carbon arc lamp, it had a brightness of 13 million candle power, and they wanted to use it as a tactical weapon to temporarily blind adversaries during nighttime combat. They called this lamp the Gizmo, and it was mounted on M3 tanks. And it looks like we've made it to the circle, so let's see what's here. There are still rock-lined walkways everywhere, so let's try to take one of the walkways and get off the road. Maybe we'll see something a little bit more interesting. Getting back to the Gizmo, or the carbon arc lamp, as you could probably imagine, putting lights on tanks helped give away the tank's position, and anti-tank rounds would hit them too quickly, so the project was abandoned. It's a little bit harder to make out the path here. Looks like they used different colored rocks and a lot of bushes have grown over the path, but you can still mostly see it. I have no idea where we're going right now. We're just following a random path. Though, here's a concrete block. Something was here. And here's another walkway. Let's just head over here and see where this leads. It looks like it just goes on forever out into the desert. But I'm going to go ahead and head back and try to get to the top of the circle. Here's a foundation. Most of the structures out here would have been tents, but there were a few permanent buildings built. Here's a fire pit. This is probably newer, probably not original to the camp. This camp was only in use for a short time, from September 1943 to March 1944, so the troops that were sent here were spared the brunt of the summer. In all, there were about 10,000 troops in this camp. And I don't know how well you can see this in the camera yet, and I did not see this with the drone, but there's a flagpole with the American flag on it in front of us. I've been to several of these desert training center camps, and most have absolutely nothing left. So it's pretty surprising to see a flagpole out here. I'm not sure if it's original to the camp, but it's definitely interesting. After the army left, everything here, the tents, the buildings, everything but the tanks, was auctioned off to the highest bidder. This upper part of the circle where we are now seems to be the one part of the camp where there are no walkways or planters, and there are no cactus out here either. So this must have all been cleared out when the camp was active, and there must have been something out there. With the wind blowing and catching the flag like it is, it makes a great image right now. When they built this camp here, of course they wanted to keep everything secret, but there were gold miners working active claims in those mountains back there. And of course you could see lights out here for miles, especially 13 million candle power lights, so it'd be kind of hard to keep this whole operation a secret with miners up there seeing everything that's going on. So to help encourage them to leave, the tanks would do target practice towards the mountains. So this was the location of the 150th Station Hospital. And the soldiers wrote 150 in the rocks here, with Camp Bouse below it. It looks like the flag is lit up at night. There are some lights here. There are some concrete foundations over here. This is probably actually where the hospital would have been. And you definitely have to be careful walking around out here. You don't want to get your foot caught on that. Of all the units that trained out here at Camp Bouse, I know the 748th Tank Battalion, which was nicknamed the Rhinos, took part in the D-Day invasion at Normandy. But also the 701st, 736th, 738th, 739th, and 740th Tank Battalions trained here as well. And this looks like a rather long sidewalk over here, so let's walk down it and see where it goes. Because my theory is they're not going to spend the time and effort to build a concrete sidewalk unless it goes somewhere. Of course, we were probably at the end of the sidewalk, so we'll see where it begins. The Gizmo didn't work out for what they were testing it for, but they did end up using it for lighting up the battlefield and some water crossings. Some of the soldiers that served here believe the carbon arc lamps left them sterile too. This sidewalk goes on for a pretty good distance too. I have a feeling it's not really leading anywhere and we're going to get to the end of it and it's just going to end and there's not going to be anything there. But there's only one way to find out. There's that book, Where the Sidewalk Ends. I think we're about to find it. I was kind of hoping we'd see a name or something etched in the concrete, but I doubt any soldier would have dared to do it. And here's the end of the sidewalk, and there's nothing here. No walkway, no planter, not even a cactus or a road. There must have been something here or some reason they built a sidewalk from here to the hospital. But whatever that reason is, I have no idea. Nothing's left of it. It looks like we found where they're discarding all the nails, though. There are quite a few concrete blocks in the hospital area. This area appears to have been the most built up out here. And also a good reason that if you come out here you want to stay on the established roads, because one of these blocks with these spikes in them could really do a number on your tires. But it's kind of amazing. This camp was only in operation for 8 months, and it forever changed the landscape out here. I'm sure this place was quite the shock to men who came out here from big cities or Midwestern farms or pretty much anywhere else in the United States to be in this vast, nearly empty desert. The men and women who would later go off to fight in Europe certainly left their mark on this place, though. So that's our look at the Army's top secret Camp Bouse. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up, consider subscribing, and we'll see you next week.